Alright, peace. My name is Brother Kareem. Thank everybody for coming out. When I play, it's certain video slides that I'm gonna play. So just, I guess, try your best to keep up with it. The sound, we having problems with the sound, so we just gonna go with what we got. Now the sound. So the title of this lecture is called Killing Two Birds with One Stone. And the reason why we entitled it Killing Two Birds with One Stone, because it has been recently information that has been coming into the community saying that first, the Prophet Muhammad didn't exist, peace be upon him, and the other view is that the Prophet Muhammad is Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was the fifth who made Khalifa. And we're going to get into that situation and break it down. So the information has come into the conscious community via these two brothers mainly. This brother people may be a little bit more familiar with, named Brother Ali Muhammad, and he's the one who holds the view that Abdul Malik is the real Prophet Muhammad, and we're gonna go into why he says that. And this brother right here, who quite frankly really shouldn't even be speaking on Islam, is the one that's saying that the Prophet Muhammad did not exist. So before we get all the way into the lecture, I just want to do a quick overview about a little bit about the reality of Islam today. Now this is a view of the populations of Muslims across in the world, and as you can see, the Indonesian people lead the Muslim population in the world. And the reason why this is important to understand is because it's largely said that Islam in the conscious community is a slave religion, that is a pale Arab religion where it's a bunch of terrorists and stuff like that, but you rarely ever see who is really the majority of the Muslims around the world, and it's not Arabs, and it's not so-called terrorists. And the people of Indonesia have accepted Islam after the classical age of Islam, so it was after the expansion of the early Islamic empire. So Islam spread into this part of the world through trade and different things like that, so it never was a standing caliphate when these people accepted Islam. I just put together a little collage of some of the Indonesian Muslims, how they look, their lifestyle, and also they are poised to take over the fashion industry within Indonesia. They plan to be the biggest designers of Islamic women's fashion by 2020, and this is just some of the things that go on there. Alright, so the epilogue. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah was born 570 in a town called Mecca. Muhammad received his first vision in a cave near Mecca in 610. Muhammad and his followers flee to Medina in 622. And the Muslims captured Mecca, and the Kaaba is cleansed in 630. And the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, happened in 632. Now, there's a reason why I started there and I named that the epilogue, because that is where it begins and that's where this story is going to end. So we're going to show and prove that is epigraphically proven that Muhammad existed. That's the evidence within its inscriptions. We're going to show historical outlines that Muhammad existed, and we're also going to show places and times and dates when he existed and the people that lived during his time. So this is a picture of the Jabal Hira, the cave where the Prophet Muhammad first received his revelations of the Quran. This is something that really exists. This is, you can see it's somewhere in this spot. It's kind of blurry because of the light. But this library in Shib Ban Hisham in Mecca is cited on the place where the Prophet, peace be upon him, was born on May 12th April 22nd in 571 in the year of the elephant. Now it's important to understand that date, the year of the elephant. So the year of the elephant is also talked about in the Quran. I'll just read a couple passages quickly. It says, "Hast thou not seen how thy Lord dealt with the people of the elephant? Did he not cause their plan to miscarry? And he sent against them swarms of birds, which ate their carrion, striking them against stones of clay, and thus made them like broken straw eaten up." Now, this is some information that I found in the Dictionary of African Christian Biography. It talks about Abra, the man during the year of the elephant that came to conquer the Kaaba. Yemen, southern Arabia, was colonized by the Ethiopian people during the birth of Muhammad. Now, because the Kaaba could rival his site that he built in southern Arabia, he had intentions on coming to conquer the Kaaba and destroy it. Now, this is, like I said, within the Dictionary of African Christian Biography. They also record that this is something that actually took place. This is a picture of the cathedral in Yemen, where Abra al-Ashara built an imposing cathedral. So this still stands today. So we're showing that the historicity of Muhammad is already intact. The Quran talks about the year of the elephant. The Ethiopian Christians recorded that Abra was a real person. The cathedral that he built still stands. Alright, so now, why are we here today? Why are we even talking about this subject? So it said, "It shall be so, even when Gog and Magog are let loose, and they shall hasten forth from every height." Chapter 21, verse 97 of the Holy Quran. Now, these brothers that are presenting this information, the source of their information are these German scholars, these Orientalists. This is the source of where these brothers is getting this propaganda from. Every argument that the brother Ali Muhammad has made against Islam, I have found it either in anti-Islamic literature or Orientalist literature. But he keeps coming among the people saying that he made this stuff up. He found these great discoveries. But everything he say is not original, and it has already been said by Orientalists and people that don't like Islam. So we can see that. So really what I'm going to be discussing is debunking the Orientalists, because they are the source of where he getting his information from. So this verse refers to the latter days when the European will come out of the caves and hillsides of Europe and conquer, colonize, and take over the world. Gog and Magog, Al-Dajjal, and the Jinn are all synonymous, just sometimes different manifestations of the same beast. So, and I'm going to prove this very quickly. This is a verse in the Holy Quran talking about Gog and Magog. Now we're going to show where these people call themselves Gog and Magog. So it's not my definition of them. This is what they say themselves.
Right.
Hit the next section. Alright, so introduction. Unlike Christianity, Islam is not a belief system whose religious formula and expression are centered on the deification and glorification of a man. To put it another way, Muslims are not Mohammedans, and Islam is not the worship of Muhammad. This can help to explain why our earliest epigraphic records are not awash with references to Muhammad. So the reason why that's important to understand is because one of the arguments that the Orientalists make is that in the early history of Islam, we don't find Muhammad mentioned in the epigraphical records. The epigraphical records mean, why did y'all not make monuments to Muhammad? Why was his name not carved in stone or on coins or this and that? And most Orientalists, or these German scholars, they come from the perspective of a Judeo-Christianity perspective. And in Christianity, the worship of Jesus is centered in their worship. So they're approaching the subject like, well, we worship Jesus, so we make monuments to them and all these monuments, so why don't y'all have these monuments to Muhammad? And so since we can't find these monuments worshiping Muhammad, then he must not have existed. This is a part of what their argument is. So these are some early coins. And as you can see, they just worship the creator. So this one says Bismillah, Bismillah al-Aziz. You can see the translation, Bismillah al-Rabi. So the point is that the earlier coins didn't mention Muhammad, but they did have inscriptions praising God, because like I just said, Islam is not built upon the foundation of worshiping a man. The foundation of Islam is to worship the one God. So now the reason why these coins look like this, another point to understand, is that when these Arabs were united together upon this doctrine, and they started to spread out and go into different directions, it was two major world empires that they were squeezed into. It was the Persian or the Sassanid Empire, and it was the Byzantine Roman Empire. So these people spread out through different directions, and it took a while to develop the way they was going to rule. They was taking over these empires. So instead of making their own coins at first, they just put their inscriptions on the coins of the people they conquered. So this was the Persians that they conquered. This was how their coins were minted. So this is a picture of one of the fire worshippers from the Zoroastrian religion. So instead of changing it to their own formula, which they would do later, they just put inscriptions worshiping God on the side. Alright, so now back to Gog and Magog. This is a picture of the annual Lord Mayor's procession in the city of London. So they built these big statues of Gog and Magog, and they parade them through the streets of London. So like I said, Gog and Magog, the Anglo-American Israeli alliance is Gog, and Magog is Russia. The next slide. This is another picture of Gog and Magog figures located in the Royal Arcade of Melbourne, Australia. It's easy to find. You see the reference right there. So like I said before, these people build monuments to Gog and Magog. And this is the ancient name that they're called within the Holy Quran and in the Bible. Churchill says, it seems that they, Gog and Magog, represent none too badly the present state of world politics. World politics, like the history of Gog and Magog, are very confused and much disputed. Still, I think there is room for both of them. On the one side is Gog and the other Magog. But be careful, my Lord Mayor, when you put them back, to keep them from colliding with each other. For if that happens, both Gog and Magog will be smashed to pieces, and we should all have to begin over again and begin from the bottom of the pit. Now, this was during an event where they were rebuilding the statues of Gog and Magog because they had got destroyed previously. And so what he was trying to say was that, look, we represent this side of the power, we ruling this, and y'all ruling the other side. Y'all gonna dominate from this wing, we gonna dominate from this wing. We represent so-called democracy and the Judeo-Christianity way. Y'all represent not capitalism, communism, and the atheist perspective. So these are the two ruling sides of Gog and Magog. Now we can see today that this is the difference between Eastern and Western Europeans. And you even see today that they're clashing a little bit. And this is what Churchill was talking about, because Russia has took back over Ukraine. We all been seeing that in the news lately, right? So pretty much they're trying to reassert their authority back to let them know, you know, we trying to step back up as a world power on the scene. So this is pretty much the whole situation with Gog and Magog, and you're gonna see why this is important in a minute. So the jinns revolt against religion. The inhabitants of northern hilly tracts of Europe of white and red color, whom other people looked upon as being separate from other human beings, and who lived detached from the civilized peoples of Asia, but who were destined to make a great revolt against religion. Now this is the point that I'm making. One of the things that was prophesied that they was going to do when they came out was that they was going to make a revolt against religion. So this is what they're prophesied to do. So the Orientalists represent the intellectual side of them making this revolt against religion or the natural or indigenous people's way of life. Because if you look all around the planet, all indigenous people have this so-called indigenous or natural religion, except for the European. So I'm reading. So it says that I see that the common people are more vulnerable to the lies of the clergy, whereas the intellectual ones are more susceptible to the falsehoods spread by the philosophers. So what this means is that when the Europeans came out and they started to colonize everywhere, they came with the religion of Christianity to most of the people. So if they couldn't get you to join Christianity, then they hit you with the philosophy. There other Darwinism and other different theories and stuff like that. So most of the common people fell for the Christianity, and if you didn't fall for the Christianity, then they tried to get you on the other wing with the philosophies, and all with the goal of getting you to get away from a spiritual connection to the Creator. So the Orientalists. So we know exactly who I'm talking about. Be very clear about who we talking about. It says, and I looked and behold a pale horse, and the name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over a fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword and with hunger, with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And that's recorded in Revelation 6 verse 8. So I'm going to go through this real quick just to explain what Orientalism is. So it's a term used by art historians and literary cultural study scholars. It's pretty much, so I won't just be reading all night. Orientalism in a nutshell is how Western people define Eastern people. They want to come to you and they're gonna tell the world how the East is. That's pretty much what their job is. So their job is to paint a picture of how Eastern culture is to the Western people. This is a famous book by Edward Said called Orientalism. He pretty much wrote the framework on this whole Orientalism definition. He just pretty much reiterated what I said. So within the oral tradition, the hadith is a hadith that said that the Dajjal will be blind in the right eye, and that's recorded in the Musnad of Ahmed bin Hanbal. So what that pretty much means is that this Dajjal, this jinn, Gog and Magog, when they would come out, they would be blind in one eye, meaning that they would be spiritually blind. So they would be masters in the art of materialism, and they will advance in that spectrum. But when it comes to spirituality, they would be devoid of that type of framework. So that's why when they come among the Eastern people, at first they look at, oh, what y'all doing? Oh, yoga, meditation? Oh, no, that's crazy. And slowly starting to become in vogue now in the Western world. They starting to understand why did the ancient people have these practices. But at first, oh, what is that? What are y'all doing? You know what I mean? Anything that's spiritual, they can't seem to understand or grasp those concepts. So the Orientalist view, I would say Islam was looked upon as an alien menace which historically had enormous military and political success throughout the world, and consequently was a threat to Western civilization. This is the most important thing to understand from this slide. The Orientalist views Islam as a threat to white supremacy. This is the thing to understand. So they write with the purpose of trying to overturn Islam and to destroy it at its foundation. This is what they do. And they pump millions of dollars into the efforts to try to do it. Go ahead. Alright, so the oral tradition, the hadith. So it was a large body of oral traditions that were brought into writing form after the Prophet had passed. They were mainly collected during the reign of the Abbasid Caliphate, the canonical collection. So that means the ones that considered the most authentic, those 6 hadith were mainly brought into writing during the Abbasid Caliphate. But it was other hadith collections that was brought into writing before the Abbasid Caliphate, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the important thing to understand about the oral tradition is that the Orientalists reject all oral tradition. So this is why sometimes when people say, when they say Muhammad didn't exist, you're like, what you talking about? He don't exist. Look at all the hadiths that talk about him. They don't accept none of that. They don't accept none of that because they say that was recorded after him. So people could have made that up. We want to see some real evidence that he existed. We don't do that. We don't do oral tradition. We write stuff down. So we don't believe you. So the hadiths are divided into 2 parts. One part which is completely protected by practice, that is to say such hadiths as are strengthened and are carried by the degree of certainty by the firm and strong and certain method of practice. The other portions of hadith which are not related to practice are accepted on the basis of the truthfulness of their narrators. But let me explain that. So pretty much you got the oral traditions that is known that these was true because the people have been doing it for hundreds of years. They've been doing the same practice, so they already know that this was true because they already been doing it for hundreds of years. And next, you know, they consider a hadith strong or not by the people who narrated it in that form. So Fred M. Donor in his book Muhammad and the Believers at the Origins of Islam, and don't worry, this is just me laying the foundation for me to completely debunk what the brothers have said. I'm about to bring the rest of the information real quick, but I'm just laying the foundation right now of who we talking about. So it said these reports contain material of many kinds. Some of them appear to be sober recountings of events based ultimately on the testimony of eyewitnesses. Others offer miracle stories or improbable idealizations and seem to belong to the realm of legend and religious apologetic. Like I said, that's page 39 of Muhammad and Believers. So the correct way to approach the oral traditions. Things to look for when you study hadiths. Number 1, if a hadith contradicts the Quran, we completely reject that hadith. The superstructure of Islam is the Holy Quran. We do not accept hadiths that go against what it says in the Quran. So then you have hadiths that are legendary or fictional accounts to make the Prophet seem superhuman. So these hadiths are narrated within the traditions, and these are some of the ones that the Orientalists point out to prove that they're fake because they make the Prophet seem like he was a superhuman. Then you have Sunni, Shia, or Persian influenced traditions. Now, because it was so many different sects and there was factional fighting within the early Islamic period, people did forge hadiths that would strengthen their sect's side of the argument. So that is true. And then you have oral traditions that are historically historical and accurate accounts of what actually happened. Alright, now real briefly, why was not the hadiths recorded in the first or so-called righteous Caliphate period? Now, it is said about Hazrat Abu Bakr, the first Caliph, that after the death of the Rasul, he once collected the people and told them, you relate the sayings of the Rasul and you differ amongst yourselves about it. Those people who shall come after you shall differ more. So you do not tell any hadiths of the Rasul. If anybody asks you about a saying of the Rasul, you tell him that the book of God is present between you and me, and that it's said to be lawful in it, be considered lawful, and all that is said to be unlawful in it, be considered unlawful. And he also burned some tradition that he had been collecting. So, and also, and there's another narration, but I'm not going to read that. Umar also went around and he had a stick with him. And he would hit people with sticks, whoever he found recording hadiths at that early period. We'll go past that. Alright, so the Muwatta of Imam Malik. This is a manuscript that is in the Australian National Library, And the manuscript, excuse me, dates back to the time that Imam Malik lived. The papyrus fragment is dated to Malik's time, 179 years after Hijrah. So this collection was before the those canonical collections, those 6 most authentic, or not most authentic, but the ones that are considered most authentic by the Sunni world. So this is earlier transcript that mentions Muhammad, and this is worth mentioning because another one of the arguments that Ali Muhammad says and other people is that there's no other sources mentioning Muhammad before those canonical collections when it was other sources that mention Muhammad. And that's just a picture of it. Alright, so the Quran, the most memorized book in the world. The most important structure to Islam and the Muslims is memorized by millions of Muslims, emphasizing the importance on the oral tradition. So this is important to understand because 6th, 7th century Arabia, you had people who were, this was an oral society. Pretty much the society ran on people memorizing things and reciting things. This is why the oral tradition is key. You can't understand a society that was an oral people without understanding that oral tradition. If you reject the oral tradition, then you're rejecting everything that the people believe about themselves. But this is one of the trademarks of Orientalism. It comes into a society and tells the people, I know about you better than you. I don't care what you say about yourself. I'm going to tell you about you. So, 4 times in the Quran, it says, and indeed we have made the Quran easy to understand and easy to remember. But is there anyone who will receive heed? 4 different times the same exact verse is told. So let's see if this is true. It said we have made it easy to memorize. And that's why it's the most that's why it is the most memorized book in the world. Hit slide. I think we're gonna come to our first video. Alright. Now hopefully y'all can hear this. It's the one I've been trying to. Now this pretty much is a video of a regular guy in the grocery store that has the Quran memorized. Here. You don't have the speakers on up? Give me some shit here. Come on, man. Hey. Go ahead, go. Hey, you on camera already? Can I hear that again? Adam, please. Come on, man. وبلغ رسول كريم ونحن على ما قال مولانا مصطفانا من الشاهدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alright, so that was a video. Like I said, regular dude in the grocery store. Just seemed like a regular old dude, but people walking around got this whole book memorized in their head. And if this video play, I'm gonna show a video of a 3-year-old Hafiz Quran. Now that is mean that the person, when you call somebody Hafiz the Quran, that mean they got the whole book memorized. that this is a 3-year-old that got the whole book memorized, and the verse keeps saying, like I said, 4 different times that we have made it easy to remember. I mean, easy to remember and easy to understand. So y'all get the point, because we can't hear it that much, so I ain't gonna go on. But if anybody want to reference that, you can see where you can go check that out at on YouTube. But the point is that if a 3-year-old can remember a whole book, this is telling you that the melodic sounds of the language is why it's easy to remember. It's because it's like a song. When it's recited, it's like it go in a certain format. It's a song, so that's why it's easy to remember. Now, this is the point I'm making about the oral tradition. These people could remember because the language is melodic. So when people try to say, oh well, we're not accepting the oral tradition, how are you going to say that these people didn't remember their own history when they can memorize a whole book? Generation after generation after generation, they can memorize a whole book, but you're going to say they can't remember their family members? They can't remember what happened? But that's the ignorance of the German scholars and those different European scholars, because it's something that's unfamiliar within their culture. So because it's unfamiliar to them, then it can't be real and it can't be possible. And these brothers accept that same line of thinking. Go ahead. All right, now put it back up. It's a big full screen. When you do that. Right here? Yeah. Hit it. So, all right, so the final word in this subject, and also we know in West Africa you have the griots who pretty much they do this by profession. They go around with the oral traditions and the histories of hundreds of thousands of years of history, and they go from village to village and they tell the histories of people through song. So I'm making this point emphatically clear because one of the arguments that people make is that they reject all the hadiths. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have to be critical about the hadiths and approach them critically, because you do. Because there was a lot of politics involved with their recording. But to reject all of the oral tradition is wrong. You just pretty much, you're not going to understand the people, the culture, if you reject all the oral tradition. So, all right, we've come to the end of the introduction, right? Anytime you see this seal, that means we're going to move on to a new subject. All right. Now, another thing that has been big in this, you know, with these brothers, is this whole, I hope I ain't forget the book. I forgot the book. But anyway, so another thing, oh, the hidden origins of Islam. The hidden origins of Islam. You don't know the hidden origins of Islam. So it's this new book out called The Hidden Origins of Islam. And it was written by a group of German Orientalists. And so this is one of the main books that these brothers keep putting out. Oh, the hidden origins of Islam. And they try to make this Syriac connection and try to say, some of them say Jews created Islam, the Christians created Islam, the Syriac people created Islam. So everybody created Islam according to them. But the real hidden origins is Ethiopia, or the less talked about people who made a contribution to Islam. So this says, moreover, the Lord stirred up against Jeroham the spirit of the Philistines and the Arabians who were near the Ethiopians. And that's in 2 Chronicles 21:16. Now I just brought that in to say, it shows that it says the Arabians who were near the Ethiopians. And if you look at this map, This is a picture of Southern Arabia right here. And this is Africa right here. And you can see this is the kingdom of Aksum. So like I said, Southern Arabia or Yemen was colonized by the Aksum Empire. This was the period of, you say, black imperialism. So before Muhammad was born, Southern Arabia was a part of the Ethiopian Empire. Now this is going to be important to understand as we move forward. Oh, man, fact. Alright, hit play on that. Now this is John Henry Clark talking about Islam. Ah, no, that's a good play. Yeah, go ahead. Just go back to the John. Alright, pretty much what he was talking about, this is pretty much a lecture that he did called The Rise of Islam. Now whether you agree with him or not, and this was the other brother, Shaka Akmos, he was sitting on the couch saying, oh, when I used to listen to John Henry Clark, you know, he would say stuff 3 times and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But you might say listen to him when he told you about the Ethiopian influence on Islam. So he was supposed to be your teacher, but instead of you listening to him, you go to the German scholars. And you bring this book into the community, and now you got people buying this Hidden Origins of Islam written by these German scholars, but you didn't listen to your own scholar when he told you the Ethiopian contribution to Islam. And pretty much what he was saying in that video slide that I was going to show was that people around the Prophet had spoke that was Ethiopian, and that's what he was going to go into. Alright, so now this is recorded in the oral tradition. We're going to get into this Ethiopian influence on Islam. So it says, the Prophet said, time will pass rapidly, good deeds will decrease. Miserliness will be thrown in the hearts of the people, afflictions will appear, and there will be much al-harj. They said, oh Allah's apostle, what is al-harj? He said, killing. And that's narrated by Abu Huraira, volume 9, book 88, and Bukhari. So you can see the references. And the Prophet said as above, and harj in the Ethiopian language means killing. So you got to ask, why is it recorded that the Prophet was saying these words in Ethiopian language and the people around him didn't know what he was saying? Now this is recorded in the oral traditions. So they back up that it was some type of Ethiopian influence. Now this is the Prophet who the Quran was revealed to saying these Ethiopian words. So it says the Ethiopian, no, go to the next slide. So the daughter of Khalid bin Sa'id, I went to Allah's apostle with my father, and I was nearing and wearing a yellow shirt. Allah's apostle said, Sana. Abdullah the narrator said that Sana meant good in the Ethiopian language. All right. And I can go through and keep showing more examples of this. And so when I first showed that Arabia was once a colony of Ethiopia, and then the Prophet kept speaking Ethiopian language, it's clear that it was an influence of the Ethiopian people on the Prophet and on that area of Southern Arabia. Next slide. Alright. Since y'all like German scholars so much, not y'all, people that's gonna see this. Here's a German scholar, Professor Crump. He says the Muslim tradition has it that Muhammad understood and spoke even Ethiopic. This is page 206 of his book, The Quran and His Historical Context. Now, his actual focus of research chronicles the historical documents of medieval Ethiopia, the genesis of Arabic languages before the rise of Islam, the Ethiopic influences on the Quran in early Islam, and the relations and exchange between Ethiopia and the Muslim world in the Middle Ages. And currently his working areas is history and culture of Ethiopia, Semitic epigraphy, especially in North Arabian Quranic studies. So he also says, on the basis of phonetic shape and semantic peculiarities, it is probable that some of these Ethiopic words, even when ultimately of Aramaic origin, came into Arabic and the Quran via direct and possibly oral transmission. Ethiopian merchants, mercenary slaves, and even priests, or why not priests, perhaps most importantly, Muslim Arab muhajirin of the first era to Ethiopia. This last assumption is corroborated by the fact that the Quranic passages are all of late Medinan ones. These words are not isolated lexiconical items, not isolated borrowings. The context of the Ethiopic words in the Quran demonstrate that they are part of transmitted material. This material has to be scrutinized and taken into account carefully. This is in the book, the Quran, in his historical context. Now what he is showing is that linguistically, there are words in the Arabic that are of Ethiopian origin. And so it has to be some type of Ethiopian influence on that. Now, why is it that the German scholars don't talk about that? Why is it that they point out the Syriac words, but they don't talk about the Ethiopian words? And then they build this foundation of saying, oh no, it was Syria. This is the hidden origins of Islam, even though there is no hadiths where the prophet is saying words in Syriac. They can't point that out, but they ignore the Ethiopian influence. So this is from the well-known movie The Message, when King Al-Nagaish. So the prophet said, today a pious man from Ethiopia, Al-Nagaish, has expired. Come on to offer the funeral prayer. And we lined up in rows, and after the prophet led the prayer, we were in rows. Jibril added, it was the second, and that's the second row. That's a volume, that's also in Bukhari. Now, it's once again, this is a map in 565. And it says the perception and understanding of the international community towards Ethiopian Muslims have been blurred. People know Ethiopia by its Christian kingdom and Christian kings. Due to the lack of the separation of state and religion, the history of this country was recorded by the church. So much of the Muslim Ethiopian population's history was left out because Ethiopia is a Christian country. There's no separation between church and state. So some of that history has been left out. And so this is why it's been a misunderstanding about Muslims in Ethiopia. And I'm not even gonna go to another video. I had there's a video called Ethiopia and Islam by Hakeem Quick. And if you look at that video, you'll see some sharifs in Ethiopia that go back to the line of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So the sharif is somebody who's an actual descendant of the man. So how can he be a sharif if it was no Prophet Muhammad? And if you're going to say, like what was alleged by Ali Muhammad and other brothers, that it was the pale Arabs that made it up. So why are these Ethiopian people making this story up then, if it was the pale Arabs? How are you going to pull it? They was involved in the conspiracy to make them up too? That don't make no sense. And this book by J.A. Rajana, no, go past that. Alright, so King Nagaish of Abyssinia. The king of Abyssinia became a Muslim in the beginning of the 7th century from the Prophet Muhammad's influence. After the king received Islam, the Prophet Muhammad put his name as Ahmed al-Nagaish. King Nagaish died in 630, and his spiritual kingdom of Nagaish town, where he was laying down in front of the Nagaish mosque with the Prophet Muhammad's important Sahaba. So the first migration of the Muslims, when they was running out, when they got ran out of Mecca, they went to Ethiopia, and some of those companions died there. So this is in Ethiopia. The settlement of King Nagaish is the Nagaish area was accompanied by the Sahaba who came from Arabia. The grave of those Sahabas are found there. Total of 15 descendants of the Prophet Muhammad were dead in Nagaish town. 10 men and 5 women. 12 of them rest together with King Nagash's body. Now this is the sign in front of the historical place where King Nagash's body lays with the Sahaba that died there. So once again, why would these Ethiopian people make this history up? Why do they have a historical site and a body? This is inside the museum where we see the dead bodies of the people. These are the grave sites of the Sahaba, right? So we have actual grave sites of the people who migrated there. So if the story was made up and there was no Prophet Muhammad, where the grave sites come from? And if it was made up hundreds of years later by the Pale Arabs, whatever that's supposed to mean, did they go around to all these different places that got evidence of the existence of the Prophet Muhammad? They say, all right, but look, Ethiopians, we gonna make a deal with y'all. Y'all make some graves up. We gonna pay y'all off for something. You know, make this fake palace. We gonna make the grave sites. Right. Yeah, let's do all that. Yeah, it's slide. All right, so another early influence. So Amu Armenia, an Ethiopian woman, had influenced the psychology of the Prophet Muhammad. So pretty much while his mother was on an expedition, she died. And so his foster mother pretty much was an Ethiopian woman. So the Prophet was breastfed by an Ethiopian woman. So when he was a baby, he was raised by an Ethiopian woman. So it was no wonder why he knew Ethiopian words. You're going to speak the language of your mother. So if she was around him nursing them and feeding them, it would have been no way that he wouldn't have known Ethiopian words and customs. And this is another reason why you see Ethiopian words within the Quran. And this shows that connection of that hidden origin. And this is why the brother's argument is weak. Because there's so many people and evidences outside of Arabia. Okay. Now this is located in the Bab al-Sagar cemetery in Damascus. Now this is the tomb of Bilal, the Ethiopian. Once again, he lived during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So did these same Pale Arab, they went to Damascus too? Come on, make up the grave site for us.
Conspiracy gets deep.
Come on. Come on, make up this body. You know what I'm saying? Where the graves? Well, why you keep having all these grave sites of people who actually existed? Alright. We gonna move on. Y'all see the seal, right? Alright, go ahead. Alright. Quranic evidence and supporting documents. Okay, this is when our argument, we gonna take the next, we gonna slice it off. We gonna pretty much end this thing right here. It's already ended, but we gonna really end it right now. We gonna show the epigraphical evidence that number one, Muhammad existed, and ain't no damn way he was Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And we gonna show that without a doubt. Alright. This is just a fragment of the Sinai Quranic fragments. Now this was found in southern Arabia in the 1970s. And pretty much it was a copy of the oldest one that they got now, almost a complete manuscript, but it was different manuscripts. It's not only the Uthmanic text was found, but other manuscripts was found that pretty much had the dialects of some of the different companions, collections. So it was some of the Uthmanic one, as well as some other manuscripts that was found. And it date back to, some say 671 or before. And you know how they argue with the carbon dating and all that stuff. Alright. So Dorner says the late origins hypothesis fails to explain many features of the Quranic text, analysis of which suggests that in fact the Quran did coalesce very early in the history of Muhammad's community. Within no more than 3 decades of Muhammad's death, for example, meticulous study of the text by generations of scholars has failed to turn up any plausible hint of anachronistic references to important events in the life of the later community. So what he's saying is the late origins hypothesis says that the Quran was collected 200 years after the Prophet. He's saying generations of Orientalists have dissected that Quran and no evidence of that has come up, because surely they would have been talking about some of what happened in the later generations. Why would they leave out things that was going on during their time? But you find no evidence of them talking about anything that happened. It was 2 civil wars after the Prophet, all the other different things that happened after his death. Surely that would have been talked about if it was compiled later. Okay. 4 times in the Quran, Muhammad is mentioned by name. Right? You see the references there. He's mentioned by name 4 times in the Quran. Go ahead. But let's take a closer look at this one verse right here in particular. It says, Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and the seal of the prophets. And Allah has full knowledge of all things, right? And so we put the Arabic there, part of that translation, so the brother can't sliver out of this verse, right? So it says, Ma kana Muhammadin Abba Ahadin min Rijalikum. So that's the part. Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. And what that means is that he had no surviving sons. Okay? He didn't have any male offspring that made it throughout their infancy when this verse was revealed. And so people used to taunt him. Oh, you don't have no male children. You don't have no sons, blah, blah, blah. And so this verse was saying, well, yeah, he's not the father of any of your men. But he is the messenger of Allah and the seal of the prophets. And just for further clarification, we have like 7, 8 other translations that all translate the verse the same way. Muhammad don't have no male sons. He don't have no male sons. That's just point period blank. But on the contrary, Abdul Malik has many male sons. He has 15 sons, in fact. So Abdul Malik ibn Marwan had sons. In fact, 4 of his sons succeeded him after his death. And that's why he's called Abu Muluk, the father of kings within the history of Islam. So the brother Ali Muhammad said that Abdul Malik is the real Muhammad. Not the Muhammad of the Quran. I don't know what Muhammad he talking about. But the Muhammad of the Quran ain't had no male sons, according to the Quran. And that's the book we follow. He did not have any male sons. Abdul Malik had male sons. So we know he was not Muhammad, according to the Quran. He was not Muhammad, because Muhammad didn't have any male sons. To further emphasize the point, we got the Umayyad family tree. Now we see Abdul Malik right here, and these was his 4 sons that succeeded him after his death. Al-Walid the first, Suleiman, Hisham, and Yazid the second. So we know for sure that Abdul Malik had sons. So that. Okay, another verse. No, I don't even gotta go there. Go ahead. Alright. Now this is the Akbar inscription from the time of Abdul Malik. This was in 73 years after Hijrah. And go back real quick. And you can find that in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And it says, in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, there is no God but Allah alone. He had no companion. Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. I had ordered the leveling of this difficult pass. Abdullah al-Malik, Amir of the faithful. And the work has been fulfilled by the two hands of Yahya bin al-Hakam. And the month of Muharram of the year 73. So within that translation, that was something that was put on the side of the road. It was put on the side of the road when, you know, once the Umayyads was building roads and doing different constructions and stuff like that. But the important thing to note about this inscription is that clearly Abdul Malik is different from Muhammad. So Muhammad was not a title, that was his name. That was his name. He was a different person from Abdul Malik. Okay. Is the name of Muhammad a title? And this is where it gets even uglier now, right? Because when you study the history, you see that Abdul Malik had a brother named Muhammad. So if he had a brother named Muhammad, how the hell was he Muhammad? Or how the hell was Muhammad a title when he had a little brother named Muhammad? And we see right here from this inscription, it says the Umayyad Caliph Abdul al-Malik bin Marwan named his brother Muhammad bin Marwan governor of Mosul, Azerbaijan, and Armenia in the year 73. Muhammad remained in office until he was dismissed by his nephew Caliph al-Walid in 91 AH. And this is a glass weight, Durham weight, the name of Muhammad ibn Marwan. So on it, it says in the name of Muhammad ibn Marwan. And there's so many other inscriptions of his other brothers' names that's on things. One of the things about the East, they always recorded their lineage. So when somebody said they named, the name of their father followed. So whatever, so-and-so, ibn so-and-so. And that's why it's easy to trace back who was related to who. But what this shows is, number one, that Orientalist argument that Muhammad is a title is false. There's too many people, other people that was named Muhammad, besides the Prophet Muhammad. So we know Muhammad wasn't a title, it was a real name. And we know Abdul Malik for sure wasn't Muhammad because he had a brother named Muhammad. Out his book, The Prophet in the Age of the Caliphs. Now this is talking about Marwan the First. This is Abdul Malik's father. I know this is a little bit tedious, but this is the type of stuff that ghetto scholars get away with on the people. Because he don't want to do this type of research, he just make up some flim-flam quick stuff to throw at the people and try to hoodwink people. So he says Marwan looked back for his political guidance, not to Muawiyah, but to the uncle he had served so long and well, the Caliph Uthman. Like Uthman, he made the family the basis of his power. Just as Muawiyah had neglected it, his sons Muhammad and Abdul Aziz had been given military commands almost from the beginning, while his eldest son Abdul Malik was soon acknowledged as heir to the Caliphate. It was a shaky beginning, but a new regiment had been born. So what this was talking about, that, and just to make it simple, when Marwan was the Caliph, before he died, he made sure that his oldest son Abdul Malik would be the next Caliph. His other son Muhammad and his other son Abdul Aziz would be governors in other parts of the country. This pretty much shows, once again, Muhammad was not a title. Abdul Malik was not Muhammad. We really done killed the bird already, both of the birds. You know what I'm saying? And, boy, hit the next slide. Past that. So all other prophets mentioned by name. Surely we have sent revelation to thee as we have sent revelation to Noah and the prophets after him, and we sent revelation to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, his children, and to Jesus, and to Job and Jonah, and Aaron and Solomon. And we gave David a book. Okay. All the prophets mentioned by name. So why would Muhammad, if it was a title, why wouldn't he be mentioned by his real name if all other prophets was mentioned by name? Let's talk about according to the Quran. If everybody mentioned by their name, then that would include his name. It wasn't a title, it was a name. And I'm beating this on the head so it can be very clear that Muhammad was his name. Alright. Beating it on the head some more. So, the 1st century after Hijrah, Arabic Greek bilingual papyrus from the time of the Umayyad Caliphate. Now, in Egypt, in the Egypt Museum, there are papyrus that are saved where the Arabic is translated into the Greek, and the Greek translations mention the name Muhammad as a proper noun. If it only meant to praise one, it was a title, they would not have translated as Muhammad. And in the Greek, they translate it as Muhammad Apostos Theos. Muhammad is the messenger of God. And if it was a title, from the Greek translation, it would have been translated as praiseworthy instead of as a proper noun. And this is a copy of that papyrus. Stop. And you can see, there's no God but God alone, Muhammad is the messenger. Go line by line from the translation from the Arabic and the Greek. Once again, like I said, there's many of these that are held in the Cairo Museum that show that parallel translation by the actual name Muhammad. So the ignorance of the Orientalists. And Muhammad is only a messenger. Verily all messengers have passed away before him. If then he die or be slain, will you turn back on your heels? And this is a verse from the Quran verifying and showing that we don't worship Muhammad the Prophet. He's the Creator is saying that if he die or he be slain, is you gonna stop? You gonna stop believing in me if he go away? And this is, like I said in the beginning, a concept that the Orientalist mind is not understanding, because they're focused on the worship of Jesus instead of the worship of the Creator. So it says Islam is not a belief system. I read that. Go ahead. All right. Another claim that was made by Ali Muhammad, he said that the first coins that mentioned the name Muhammad was by Abdul Malik. That was a lie. That was a lie. The first inscriptions of any kind to carry the name Muhammad is the Apostle of God, or coins from Bishmar Fars, apparently issued in 66 or 67 by a governor for the Zubraids. So it may be that the Umayyads were inspired to emphasize the role of the Prophet by their stern rival Abdullah ibn Zubair, known for his stern piety. That's out of Muhammad and the Believers, page 205. So real briefly, when the Umayyads was battling to take over the Caliphate, it also was a Khalifa over Mecca and Medina named Abdullah ibn Zubair. So they were pretty much in a civil war, a struggle to see who was going to take over the Islamic Caliphate. And this was after the so-called rightly guided Caliphate ship. Another interesting thing to note is that Abdullah ibn Zubair is the son of Asma bin Abu Bakr. So this man was the grandson of Abu Bakr. His mother and Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, were sisters. So once again, this is a man that lived during the time of Abdul Malik. That his lineage goes back to his aunt was Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. If the Prophet Muhammad never existed, where does this man's lineage come from? How is he related to these people? This is his name. Abdullah ibn Zubair. Who was Zubair? A companion of the Prophet Muhammad. One of the ones who was promised paradise. The people's lineage go back verifying that it was a real Prophet Muhammad. His father, and this is a copy of that coin I was talking about. You can see on the one side the Bismillah, and then Muhammad Rasulullah on the other side. This is a coin in the British Museum, London. Like I said, this was the first coin that showed the epigraphical evidence that mentioned the name Muhammad, and it was not issued by Abdul Malik. So the brother was wrong on that one when he said that. Okay, and then we gonna bury this whole Abdul Malik thing, and I ain't gonna talk about it no more. Whatever. So this is a tombstone from 71 AH, right? And this is in the Cairo Museum of Arab Art. And it says, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, the great calamity of the people of Islam is that which has fallen them on the death of Muhammad the Prophet. May God grant him peace. This is the tomb of Absa, daughter of Jaraj. Son of these parts was like messed up and they couldn't record this, bro. May clemency, forgiveness, and satisfaction of God be on her. She died on Monday, 14 days, having elapsed from Dhul Qa'dah of the year 170, confessing that there is no God but God alone without partner, that Muhammad is the servant and his apostle. May God grant him peace. Now the interesting thing, go back real quick. This tombstone is from 71 AH. During this time, Abdul Malik was still alive. How could he be Muhammad if she's saying that Muhammad had already died? Go back the other way. And she says that the greatest calamity of the people of Islam is that which has fallen them on the death of Muhammad the Prophet. So she showed that some type of calamity happened after the Prophet died. So number one, and we're going to get into a little bit what that calamity was that's recorded in the oral traditions, showing that you have to critically analyze them and you can't dismiss all the oral traditions, what we call hadiths. But like I said, this proves without a shadow of a doubt that Abdul Malik was not Muhammad, because we have epigraphical evidence that Muhammad was already dead by 71. He was already dead. He was already dead. Abdul Malik was still alive, and she mentions a calamity that happened after he died. So now this hadith ain't for the weak. This is something that is accepted as authentic by all sects. The Sunni, the Shia, everybody accepted. So this is not an unauthentic hadith, and it's recorded in Sahih Bukhari, volume 7, book 70, hadith number 573. And it says, when Allah's apostle was on his deathbed, and in the house there were some people among them whom was Umar ibn al-Khattab. The Prophet said, come, let me write for you a statement after which you will not go astray. Umar said, the Prophet is seriously ill, and you have the Quran. So the book of Allah is enough for us. The people who were present in the house differ and quarrel. Some said, go near so that the Prophet may write for you a statement after which you will not go astray. While the others said, as Umar said, when they caused a hue and a cry before the Prophet, Allah's apostle said, go away. And this was narrated by Ubaydullah. Ibn Abbas used to say, it was very unfortunate that Allah's apostle was prevented from writing that statement for them because of their disagreement and noise. Okay. What this oral tradition shows is that when the Prophet was on his deathbed and he gave a command that let me give y'all some more instruction before I die, they start arguing why he was dying. And he was never allowed to record what it is he wanted to record. And so even at some days after that, before he actually died, a group of the Meccans and a group of Medinas had met together to pick who was going to succeed him. So that calamity and then the 2 civil wars that followed was the calamity that the sister was referring to when she said there was a great calamity that happened on the death of the Prophet. So history backs up the oral tradition about what actually happened. So if you throw all that out, first of all, this is indicting some of the companions. I don't care what you say. If you're supposed to follow the Prophet and the Quran say that you're supposed to take what he give you, he told them to come let me write something for you. And some of the companions didn't want him to write it. That's factual. That's what they recorded. That was recorded within their oral tradition. Why would they record that? Why would they record that if they was trying to make up something fake and just trying to not record what actually happened? Because this is an indictment on some of those early Muslims. So this shows, like I said, that you got to critically examine the oral traditions because there is truth in it. But like I said, this also proves that it was a calamity after the prophet's death, just like the tombstone said. Go past this. Alright. So that's clear that, number one, the description of Muhammad in the Quran does not match Abdul Malik. Not talking about him. The epigraphical evidence and the inscriptions shows that Abdul Malik and Muhammad was two different people. We also showed that Abdul Malik had a brother named Muhammad, and the Arabic and the Greek papyrus show that Muhammad was a proper noun. It was a name and it was not a title. So all that information in that book, The Hidden Origins of Islam, by those German scholars, is trash. Don't waste your money on it. Don't waste your money on it. If you got it, throw it in the trash. Alright, non-Islamic sources. Patricia Crone. She was born in 1945 in Denmark. She's a scholar, author, orientalist, and historian of early Islamic history. She is notable as a historian of Islam who has treated the Quran as scripture with a history, just as there are histories of the Bible. She has authored 8 books and co-authored 2. She is quoted as saying, "We probably know more about Muhammad than we do about Jesus, let alone Moses or Buddha. And we certainly have the potential to know a great deal more." And it's out of an article that she wrote called "What Do We Actually Know About Muhammad?" Now the reason why, some people may not know why I'm quoting her, but the people who study this history, they know why I'm quoting Patricia Crone. Because she is not in favor of the Islamic history, the Islamic sad history at all. She is very critical of that sad history. This is just some of the books that she's wrote, to showing her studies on the subject from a non-Muslim's perspective. Go ahead, next. Go to the video.
You want to see if it's one?
Yes. Hit play. You see if we can hear it.
The Islamic studies. You cannot reject the Muslim story, she wrote. But you cannot accept it either. The only solution is to step outside of the Islamic tradition and start again.
There is a curtain as regards Muhammad that you can't get behind.
What do we know about him and his life?
Well, we know that he existed. We know that he was active somewhere in Arabia. We know that he's associated with a book, the Quran. He was the one who uttered it. But it doesn't get us to what actually happened, which is what, of course, the historian would like to.
Alright, and that's in a documentary called The Suppressed and Hidden History of Islam. And you can see that that's on a website called Martyrs for Jesus Christ. That's an anti-Islamic website. It's not an Islamic website at all. So the point is, but we got what we need from her. Like she said, we know Muhammad existed. We know he was in Arabia. And we know that he authored a book called the Quran. Right? So that's from a non-Islamic powerhouse. She has authored many books, and she is a leading scholar in the field of early Islamic research. And she's a professor at Princeton, New Jersey. So some of the Syriac sources, right? So before the invasion, Syriac writers used to refer to the Arabs in various contexts and with various appellations. Arabi, Ta'i, sons of Hagar, and Ishmaelites. These was all different names that they used to call the Arabs in Syria. With the 7th century advance of the Arabs, however, additional names were employed like Ta'i of Muhammad, but most often Mahgri. The unprecedented name Mahgri is provocative because it provides the greatest evidence for their self-identification as immigrants, Muhajirin in Arabic. In other words, the name immigrants implies that the Arabs had arrived to stake a claim on, occupy, and inherit the land. And that's in the nascent Islam in the 7th century, Syriac sources. So that just shows you the different names that they were called in the Syriac history. So what's some of the things that they said? Concerning Muhammad, for the most part, he is described as the first king of the Mahgri. But occasionally he is called the guide or the teacher or the leader or the great ruler. None of the Syriac writers ascribe to Muhammad or the caliphs any religious title. I'll read the rest. And that's out of the book Sources of Syriacs, Volume 1 by Alfonso Majinga. So Muhammad was talked about in these Syriac sources outside of the Islamic sources. One of those examples, right? On Friday, 4 February, 634 Dhul Qa'dah, at the 9th hour, there was a battle between the Romans and the Arabs of Muhammad. This is recorded by Thomas the Presbyter writing the 7th century in the West Syrian Chronicles, including 2 7th century Syriac apocalyptic texts. Now, what's important about this quote, the reason why I included this one, because this mentions the prophet 2 years after his death. He died in 632. This text dates to 634. So 2 years after his death, he is mentioned in a non-Islamic source. Another one. This was mentioned in the 660s, 40 years after Hijrah. It says, at that time, a certain man from along those same sons of Ishmael, whose name was Muhammad, a merchant, as if by God's command, appeared to them as a preacher in the path of truth. He taught them to recognize the God of Abraham. Now, what's important about this quote is that it starts to say things about the life of Muhammad. That it was known to the outside people, some things about him, that he was a merchant and that he mentioned Abraham. Go to the next. Now, why is that an important point? Because Abraham is mentioned 66 times in the Quran. Remember, Muhammad was only mentioned 4. Abraham is mentioned by name 66 times in the Quran. And this is some of the things that it says about Abraham. Say, Allah has spoken the truth. Follow therefore the religion of Abraham, who was ever inclined to God, and he was not of those who associate gods with God. And who is better in faith than he who submits himself to Allah, and he is a doer of good and follows the religion of Abraham, the upright. And Allah took Abraham for his special friend. Surely the nearest of men to Abraham are those who follow him and this prophet, and those who believe, and Allah is the friend of the believers. So I just quoted those verses to show, because they back up the writings of Sebos, who said that Muhammad preached the religion of Abraham. And this is backed up in the Quran. Another source. You can reference a book called Seeing Islam as Others Saw It, a survey evaluation of Christian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian writings. Now, by Robert Hoyland. Now, some of the Orientalists, they try to attack his work by questioning the way that he interpreted certain texts. But when you see, once you read the text for yourself, that the arguments is weak. So evidence from Arabia and the surrounding areas. Go ahead. Dome of the Rock. this is also a thing that has caused a lot of contention. The Orientalists have tried to say the inscriptions on the Dome of the Rock was really talking about Jesus. When they mentioned Muhammad, it was talking about Jesus, because they trying to say Muhammad was the title and that was talking about Jesus. We have already shown that Muhammad was not a title and that was his real name, so we ain't gonna spend too much time on that. So the Dome of the Rock was constructed by the order of the Umayyad Caliph in the year 689. And I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but this is one of the inscriptions on the inner octagonal arcade, the one that's on the ceiling. And it mentions Muhammad, it gives some different invocations, and it talks about some other things. So the important point to note about this is that, you know, hit the next one. Okay, it says the Dome of the Rock was built by the servant of God, Abdul the Imam al-Mamun, commander of the faithful, in the year 270. May God accept from him and be content with him. I mean, the Lord of the worlds, praise be to God. Now, the problem is that when the Absids took over, hit the next slide. When the Absids took over, Al-Mamun erased Abdul Malik's name out and put his own name to say that he was the one that founded the Dome of the Rock. But he forgot to change the date, because we know that the Absids wasn't even in power during that time. So we can conclude that, and all historians agree, that the inscription the Imam al-Mamun, commander of the faithful, really read Abdul al-Malik, commander of the faithful. So once again, Muhammad is talked about all through those inscriptions, and Abdul Malik mentioned his name separate from Muhammad, and it also says at the bottom that this was constructed in the year 72. 72 after what? We know that the Islamic calendar started after the Hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad. All these inscriptions wouldn't read from the Islamic calendar if it was no Prophet Muhammad. I just said that. So we can see here, this is how the Reform coinage looked. So after all the civil wars ended and then the Muslims gained power, they reformed their own coinage, and then you see the different Islamic feel and design for it. And this coin, it says, there is no God but God alone, he has no associate, in the name of God is Durham was struck in Rahmurs in the year 79. Once again, Islamic calendar. If it was no Prophet Muhammad, it would be no year 79. What calendar is they following? It says God is the one God, eternal, he beget not, nor is he begotten, there is none like unto him. Muhammad is the messenger of God, whom he sent with guidance and the religion of truth, that it might make it prevail. And this is also a coin that's in the British Museum. Okay. The Rosa Mubarak, the sacred chambers. Once again, it's a strange thing how, for a person who didn't exist, and we keep having these grave sites and actual archaeological evidence of these people. It's very strange that in Arabia today, they had the grave site of the Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr, and Umar. And construction was also done on this grave site by Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who was the nephew, the great nephew of Abdul Malik. So his nephews helped construct and build up the site where the real Prophet Muhammad's body lay. And also his son, Walid I, also did some construction on this site. Hit the slide. Also the house of Fatima is there. Who was Fatima? The daughter of the Prophet. So the Al-Hawashim Al-Umari, there is a family who say that they are the descendants of Ali ibn Abu Talib. They still live in Mecca and Wadi Fatima. They never at any time immigrated to Africa, for example, and returned to Mecca. On the contrary, they are people of the Haram, the sacred land, the people of Wadi Fatima, Mecca, at that time until now. So this is a tribe that never migrated outside of Arabia, that are descendants of one of the grandchildren of the Prophet Muhammad. And this is their picture. And you can find the whole article here. Now, the reason why I showed this is because this group of people, like I said before, never migrated into Africa. And this is showing that how it was the ethnicity of the Arabs was of a mixed coloring. And what's important about this one, and the reason why I showed this one, because you see black Arabs. Black Arabs, and so this crushes the Afrocentric theology that, oh, the pale Arabs came in and they enslaved everybody because they was black. No, some of them was black too. And when they fought against each other, they enslaved their own people. So it was no whole thing where, oh, they came in and they enslaved us because they was black. No, they was black too. They was black too. So that whole, oh, get rid of that, Islam is the slave religion, that's a farce. That's a farce. Hit the button. And you can see, I don't even have to go through all of the documentation that we have, because really, like I said, we have already shown and proved that Muhammad existed and he wasn't Abdul Malik. We've shown that conclusively. So we're gonna get ready to wrap this up after we do a little bit of deconstructing. So Luxembourg, Christopher Luxembourg, he's the mystery man behind a lot of this information. So it says, there is little doubt that the pseudonymous work has been useful in sparking renewed attention to the relationship between the Quran and much of the Middle East as when Islam was emerging. However, because of the hermeneutical and theological presuppositions underlying in Luxembourg's work, and the lack of a clear understanding of how languages function and the develop and wonders, whether his approach is not muddying the waters rather than clarifying them. The Quran and his historical context. Now, Luxembourg, hit the button. Luxembourg is the author of this work, the Syro-Aramaic readings in the Quran. So, what we're saying is that, first of all, Christopher Luxembourg is not even his real name. That's not even his real name. So, number one, other scholars are saying it seemed kind of crazy. His work is coming in and sparking interest, but it really just muddying up the waters. He's not really contributing nothing to the study of trying to find out how this thing actually developed. And so the so-called conscious community, who's supposed to be conscious and supposed to be aware of things, is listening to information from somebody who they don't even know who the hell he is. You don't know it's a goddamn FBI agent, CIA agent writing these goddamn books. His name ain't even Christopher Luxembourg. So if his name, you don't even know his name, you don't even know who he is, how the hell was you listening to this work and trying to spread it around the community? No. So other scholars comment on his work. Richard Crowe describes him as unaware of much of the other literature on the subject, and that quite a few of his theories are doubtful and motivated too much by a Christian apologetic agenda. And this is in the mission, dialectic, or visionary. I'm not even gonna read. I had out so many different scholars that describe his literature in the same way that it just seemed kind of strange. He make a lot of mistakes. He keep trying to promote all this Christian propaganda into the Islamic information. And it's very strange that you got this guy with this fake name and he keep putting out this work, this propaganda work that's trying to push this Christian Judeo agenda. And you Negroes fall for hook, line, and sinker.
Next time?
Yeah. Next. Next slide. So, alright, so the Arabic influence on language. Arabic influenced many languages around the globe throughout history. Some of the most influenced languages are Urdu, Persian, Turkish, on and on and on. Arabic was a major vehicle of culture in Europe, especially in science, mathematics, and philosophy. As a result, many European languages have also borrowed many words. Why am I talking about this? Because languages develop when as they're interacting with different peoples that have different languages. So words come interchangeably in and out of different language groups when they make contact with different peoples. This is just a natural flow of history and of language development. So it wouldn't be strange to find that in Arabic it also has words that you may say of our foreign source. This is just the history of languages. This is the way languages develop. That's just like if we're speaking and we know that it's dialects within the inner city. Sometimes I might say, if we talking and I'm using so-called slang or whatever, and I say he got a hammer, I might mean he got a real hammer. I might mean he got a gun, right? But depending on the context, we know what we talking about when we discussing it. So how would you come to me and tell me, you come centuries later, oh, okay, hammer really derived from a Latin word, so we gotta say it meant something Latin. It meant that we gotta go with where the origin of the word come from, when we wasn't even talking about that. So how are you gonna come into the Quran and say, oh, this word originated in Syriac, so we gonna go with what they said it mean and not what the people who spoke it meant? That's ghetto scholarship. It's point blank. Alright, so in conclusion, from the listings of the dated texts, it is clear that the name of the Prophet Muhammad appears very early in non-Muslim texts. The time period between the death of Muhammad and the earliest mention of him in the writings of Thomas the Pricebearer occurred a little over a year and a half. So a year and a half after his death, he's mentioned in a non-Islamic source. So you can't just deny that. The Muslims ain't make that up. That's in a non-Islamic source. They didn't make it up. 6th, 7th century Arabs were and are oral people, like many other Eastern people was and still are today. It is impossible to tell their history while completely leaving out the oral traditions or narrations. So that means you can't reject all of the hadith information. You have to engage the oral traditions if you're going to understand this oral people. The Ethiopian evidence is in such abundance that it would mean that if the life of Muhammad was invented, then they had to be in on the created story. Too many people from different areas would have had to been in on the creation of this fake story if you're trying to say that Muhammad was invented. And then you say the Pale Arabs did it. How they do it? Who did it? When did they do it? No answers. Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and he's the seal of the prophets, and Allah has full knowledge of all things. That verse clearly showed that according to the Quran, Abdul Malik could not have been the Prophet Muhammad. So for anybody who accepts Islam according to the Quran, you know that Muhammad had no surviving male sons. And so we know for sure that he was not Abdul Malik. So, also, the tombstone that mentioned the calamity after the death of the Prophet Muhammad when Abdul Malik was still alive. Once again, we know for certainty Abdul Malik was not the Prophet Muhammad, and the Prophet Muhammad was an actual historical figure. Everything that we've shown so far has proven those 2 points. So, pretty much that concludes our discussion. And you know, I thank everybody for listening. If you have any you want to get in contact with me in any way, you can email me at nation of Kareem at AOL.com. That's all together. You spell Kareem Kareem. And you know, peace.